Hopefully this is working, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is in the chat, I'm going to throw the agenda for the meeting in there. So I'm going to also add, so that's in the chat box now. I'm also going to add a link to our election inspector manual. And I'm going to share my screen while I'm going through the training, and that way we can all take a look at the election inspector manual while we talk about each of these sections. So the first thing that I want to talk about is going to be same-day registration. That's going to be an important factor in terms of the clerk's office. It should actually be a pretty quick procedure for us if we're going to be, for the folks who are chairing your precincts. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about voters who are not listed in the poll book, which is directly related to that same-day registration issue. The next thing we're going to talk about is poll watchers and challengers. That's going to directly apply to both in-person and absentee precincts. The procedures are slightly different, in-person versus absentee, but I'm expecting that we'll have poll challengers and poll watchers in both in-person and absentee precincts. We're going to wrap up the section with polling place management, talking about face mask requirements, safety issues in the polling place. And as we're going, feel free to ask questions. You can just jump into the chat, or you can ask your question in the Zoom call, or you can type it into the chat box. I'll be monitoring both as we go. But we'll try to leave some extra time for questions at the end today. I am hoping that the training is going to be right around the 1 hour mark, so we'll try to zip through some of the stuff as best we can, but happy to take questions for as long as we need to. So this is a lot going on. You guys are doing a really important job. Really appreciate everything that you're doing. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, feel free to jump in if you have questions at any point. So I am going to start by sharing my screen. And let's do this one. Okay. Let's see. I don't think that worked. Just a moment. Let's see. Can everybody see?
It's there.
Can you see the election worker manual?
Yep.
Okay. All right. It looks like my desktop background on my screen for some reason, but as long as you can see the manual, we are good. So let's go straight to, the other thing I'm going to do is make sure that you all can hear me okay when I inevitably turn my head, is I'm going to plug in headphones real quick. So we're going to start on page 43 of the manual, talking about same-day registration. Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yep.
So same-day registration, there's a flow chart on this page kind of directing voters to what they need to know. As far as our precinct chairs, the main thing that you need to know about same-day registration is that you can't register to vote at the precinct. I think our voters are pretty well aware of this, but I would expect some folks to come in to the precinct on election day, expecting that they can just register on the spot. So they do have to go to the clerk's office. So if someone comes into the precinct, that would be the first question is, have you already gone to the clerk's office? Do you have a receipt to vote absentee? Or did you vote absentee in the clerk's office, or do you have a receipt to vote in person in the precinct? So the flow chart here kind of walks through a couple of different options. Primarily, did the voter register? Oops, sorry about that. And zoom in here. Did the voter register at the clerk's office? If yes, does the voter have a receipt? If they do have a receipt, we can go ahead and add them to the unlisted tab and either give them a regular or challenged ballot, depending on the procedure.
listed on the receipt. If they have not gone to the clerk's office, we can direct them to go to the clerk's office. If the voter is not willing to travel to the clerk's office, so that second question there, if the answer is no, at that point, we can begin the provisional ballot process. If somebody believes that they should have been registered to vote, provisional ballots are still an option, and there is a checklist in the manual that kind of goes through the provisional ballot process. But essentially, we want to contact the clerk to make sure that the voter is not registered to vote either in the jurisdiction elsewhere or somewhere else in the state. And the poll book has the other tab that can show everyone who's registered to vote in the precinct or in the jurisdiction, but the clerk has the statewide lookup. So we want to check in with the clerk's office before we issue a provisional ballot. Have the voter complete the provisional ballot form, which is located on the provisional ballot envelope. So it's just printed straight onto an envelope where the voter can place their ballot. And there's a series of questions on that envelope. Essentially, if the voter is registered somewhere else, or if the voter is not registered somewhere else, if they have a photo ID, and if they at least claim to have registered before the 15-day deadline, at that point we can issue them a provisional ballot. And depending on the procedures and the questions on the form, may issue provisional affidavit or provisional envelope ballot. But most likely, because voters have the opportunity to register to vote in person, the provisional process will not be followed all that frequently. If we do have a provisional ballot, it's more likely than a same-day registration issue or an unregistered issue. It would be that a voter would not have would have a status flag on their registration. So on the poll book, there's a status flag box that pops up. The text is in red, and it shows various status flags. If a voter's has a verify flag, they may have to vote a provisional ballot if they are not able to show an ID. So that's something to be aware of there. But otherwise, I don't expect us to have all that many provisional ballots. So the clerk's office receipt, and this just happens to be that this is a yellow copy and a white copy. It happens to be the copy that we got from the City of Holland to help us out with seeing an example of this. If a voter has a receipt, and it will tell you to issue the voter a regular ballot if the voter registered with an ID that has a matching address. So if they have a photo ID with an address that matches, then they can be issued a regular ballot when they register to vote at the clerk's office. If the photo ID does not have the voter's current address, but they have a document showing proof of residency, then they'll be issued a receipt that outlines the challenged ballot process. So this example, this voter registered without a valid photo ID, but with proof of residency. The voter had to sign an affidavit like the one on the back of the application to vote, and this receipt tells the election inspectors to issue a challenged ballot. To issue a challenged ballot, we simply write the ballot number on the upper left-hand corner of the ballot, and making sure to avoid any barcodes or marks on the ballot. So we put the ballot number there, and then we write it faintly in pencil, cover it with white paper and a piece of tape. And the reason for concealing this is we want to preserve the voter's privacy as best we can, but make the ballot identifiable in case we later find out that there was an issue with that voter's ballot.
Can you, Steve,
Mhm.
would you just review that again? We're writing the ballot number on what?
Absolutely. So the ballot itself has a numbered stub, and
Right.
just below the stub, so it remains on the ballot, we're writing in pencil the ballot number. And then we cover it with a piece of white paper and tape to obscure it. So that way it's written there, but it's hidden. And then we process the ballot as a challenged ballot in the electronic poll book. So we'll select the challenged ballot button, enter the voter's ballot number into the poll book, and and then the voter will be issued the ballot in the poll book, and they can be handed that ballot and vote that ballot as normal. So the worker at the tabulator station will remove the stub, but the ballot number will remain on the ballot, just obscured, and they'll go through the tabulator. So we
Okay.
want to make sure, yeah, we just want to make sure we don't cover any barcodes or anything when we put that on the top of the ballot, so that the ballot can go through the tabulator without any issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of it's a pretty unusual process, but it's one we're going to definitely have this election. It's kind of a change from 2018. This is all spelled out from the law that was generated because of our same-day registration. Any other questions specifically on same-day registration or processing these ballots? Let's see. Okay. So one other thing to note, on page 45 of the manual, it says voters not listed on registration list. If somebody registered to vote on election day or in the 14 days leading up to election day, actually, if somebody registered to vote on election day or after 4 p.m. on Monday, I should say, they will not appear in the electronic poll book. So we can see here we have the list of voters. So our precinct list is on the left-hand side, and it says this precinct. We can click the other tab to see if this voter is actually registered to vote in a different precinct. We can just search for their name, and as you start typing the last name of the voter, they'll pop up in that search screen, or you can swipe the voter's driver's license. But if they're in the other tab, you may have to start typing the name. And then you'll see all of the voters who are listed anywhere in the jurisdiction. If the voter is coming to your precinct, though, and they have a receipt from the clerk's office, they've registered to vote on election day, then we're going to use the unlisted tab. The unlisted tab has always been here, but this is really going to be the first major election where we're using this feature of the poll book. We had some of this in the March and August elections as well, but this is going to be a much higher turnout election. So we click on the unlisted tab, and then we select new. So there's a new button at the bottom of the screen. This is basically adding a voter to your precinct. So when you click the new button, the unlisted voter window pops up, and you enter the voter's information directly from their application to vote, and then also confirming, of course, that they have a receipt. Once you select OK, the voter will appear in the voter search menu on the left-hand side of the screen. And they're now added to your precinct list, but they haven't been issued a ballot yet. To issue the voter a ballot, you do have to select lock this voter record, and then you'll have an opportunity to issue a ballot to the voter just like you would anyone else who's coming into the precinct. And if it's a challenge ballot, you'll select the challenge ballot option. If it's a regular ballot, you'll select the regular ballot option. And in either case, you can enter voter remarks for that voter saying that they registered to vote on election day, or if they had any questions, if any question comes out about that ballot, you can always add a voter remark there. The general remarks section would really only be used for things that affect the overall precinct. Any voter specific remarks we'd want to tie to the voter record so that we know who that remark is specifically about and which ballot number was issued to that voter. Any questions on this piece? This kind of wraps up what to do if somebody has registered to vote on election day. Okay. So I don't hear any questions. I don't think, let's see. I have the chat screen up here. Okay, I don't see any,
Can I ask a question?
I think, oh, go for it.
Did you say, I was thinking of something else. did you say remarks, you put it in the individual's remarks or you put it in the general?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So for any individual voter issue, it would go in the voter remarks section.
I thought we wasn't supposed to identify that voter.
If it depends on the issue. So if it comes to, if it's an issue like a voter signed an affidavit instead of using their driver's license, that does not go in the voter remarks section. But if there's an issue that, ballot number, trying to think of a good example of when the voter remarks section would be used, but something could be, you can't.
How about spoiled ballot?
Spoiled ballot, actually, you don't have to put something in the voter remarks section, because if you mark the ballot as spoiled in the poll book, it will just automatically add a voter remark to that record.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. And Justin, did you have anything to add?
Oh, no, I just saw a chat from Lynn that was indicating where.
That was old.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That was before he shared that. But I do have a question. Are we going to get to, or maybe I should ask now, if somebody has a mail-in ballot but has decided they want to vote in person?
Oh, absolutely, yes. This is a good time to talk about that too, because as long as we're talking about the poll book, let's see here. I'm going to scroll down to our voter status window. So let's see.
What page?
Looks like, so I'm just going to use this example that's on page 69 of the manual. This just kind of shows you what it looks like when you go into the voter screen. So you can kind of see the voter status window here. If the voter is, actually, I can pull up the poll book real quick. See if I can load that briefly here and show you an exact example of this. Okay, so this isn't in the manual. This is just a test copy of the electronic poll book. When you go to any of the voters' records, you can see the voter status. So in this instance, there's a verified, voter status is verified. The voter will need to show some form of ID before being issued a ballot. There are, though, voters like in this instance. So in this example, you can see in red that an absentee ballot, was sent by the clerk, and it gives instruction. It says voter must surrender ballot or submit an affidavit. That affidavit is an affidavit of absent voter, and it'll be in your precinct kit. Voters can just sign that, saying that their ballot was either lost or destroyed if they don't have it with them. In either case, either the surrendered ballot or that affidavit goes into the local clerk's envelope. If they're surrendering a ballot, just write surrendered on the envelope. And then that can go straight back to the clerk's office. After they have surrendered their ballot or signed that affidavit, they can just be issued a regular ballot. So it's a pretty seamless process. My guess is that we'll have a lot of folks doing that. I would check on the number of affidavits that you have readily available at your precinct when you get there in the morning, and just let the clerk know if you start to run low, if you need additional copies of that. That's something that is just a regular piece of paper that should be able to run some copies out to you. The other issue is this voter status. So in this example, the voter status window says absentee ballot number 101 was received, sent and received by the clerk. Do not issue a ballot. This is also pretty likely to happen when we have about 100,000 ballots issued throughout the county and 75,000 ballots returned. My guess is that somebody will have returned a ballot somewhere out there, and they'll come into the polling place. So we want to make sure that we check the voter status window on absolutely every single voter.
It has been remarkable to see the number of people who apply for a ballot and forgot they've applied, receive a ballot and forgot they've received one, turned in a ballot and forgot that they've done that. So I will abstain from any further commentary, but I know that, you know, genuinely, I think people may not even remember or not realize. So yeah, that's an important one to know. And it's helpful to have the EPB, you know, at least designating that for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So something very important to note on there on that status screen. So that was, yes, great question, and something that I'm sure we'll see on election day.
Hypothetically,
Mhm.
a person could turn his ballot into the city clerk at 10 o'clock, walk over next door and vote because your book is not up to date yet. It just says he was issued one. He could sign an affidavit and still vote, right? Hypothetically.
Well, and that's why we actually
Yes.
have them sign the affidavit. And the affidavit goes to the clerk's office. And if they have an affidavit for someone who shows up on their absentee voter list, that person is committed a felony. So,
And that is something, there's two things there. Yeah. And he's absolutely right. It's a 5-year felony to do that.
Mhm.
That is something that is checked in every election, that the instances of double voting. So a report is run the day after the election at the Bureau of Elections, and they literally, you know, merge those records. It's really important for the security of our election that we're not tied to the internet in the precinct with the electronic poll book. But that data is current from literally 4 p.m. on the night before, on Monday. So it's the most possible, you know, current data we can have. And then, you know, in your example, you're absolutely right. I also would recommend that if someone is coming in and does not have their ballot with them, if they're surrendering their actual ballot, then obviously we know they haven't voted. But I've talked to a number of your clerks who are encouraging you guys to call the clerk before you issue a ballot, and that's completely fine. I know it's going to take a little bit longer, but essentially, you know, you can feel free to do that. They're obviously signing that legal document that we've got on file that later they could be, you know, and would be, frankly, prosecuted for. But you can also feel free to call the clerk and just double check if they don't have their actual ballot that they're surrendering. Because
absolutely.
the clerk obviously has that data in real time. So
Absolutely. You know, one other thing, this is more of just a housekeeping note. If you can click on the 3 dots at the top of your screen and rename yourself, if your first and last name are not listed on the screen, that would help us out with taking attendance. Or if you're having trouble with that, you can just put your name in the chat and let us know what the name is calling you up on the screen. So just kind of a housekeeping note there, but want to make sure we get everybody. Make sure we know who's here and that we can let your local clerks know that you are here as well.
I can't do either.
Let's see. Can I get your name and I can rename you?
Frank Maslowski, City, Coopersville.
Okay. How do you spell your last name? Sorry.
Maslowski.
Okay. Thanks so much. Okay. So we'll move on to the next thing I wanted to go over. Was poll watchers and poll challengers, and this is going to be particularly important this election. So this, there's some information in a couple places in the manual. The page numbers are listed in the chat window, but we're going to start on page 31 of the training manual. So on page 31, under the assisting voters section, poll watchers and challengers. So there's been a lot in the news about poll watchers and challengers, of course. In Michigan, these terms mean something very specific. So poll watchers are members of the public, and members of the public are free to be in the precinct. It's kind of on a first come, first served basis, and some of our precincts are pretty small. So we need to have a public viewing area in all of our jurisdictions and all of our precincts. but we also have to be mindful of social distancing, which may mean that the number of poll watchers may be somewhat limited in this particular election. But poll watchers are free to be there. It's a public place. However, it really is up to our precinct chairs to make sure that our poll watchers are only present if they're not causing any disruptions in the polling place. So it is public, but they cannot interfere with the process. Poll challengers, unlike poll watchers, do have certain rights and requirements under Michigan law. So the challengers, as it says in the manual, they are appointed by political parties and organizations. We actually do have a number of organizations that will be sending poll challengers throughout the county, both political parties as well as 2 or 3 interest groups. Challengers must be registered to vote in Michigan, and they must also show a credential that shows their name, which precinct that they're assigned to, the group they represent, and the signature of the group's chair. And then, Lynn, I see that you had a question.
Yeah, I do. Is there a designated spot, or should we check with our clerk to see if there's a designated spot within our precinct where the poll watchers can be? I know that the poll challengers can be behind the computer area, right? Where, I guess that's what I'm asking. How do we designate where they go? And as they're coming in, will we have a list of who's coming to our precinct or anything like that?
Yeah, great. Oh, go for it, Justin.
Oh, sorry. It just brought up the legal issue that came out yesterday, but
yeah.
So yeah, rules change, up until the very last second. So, no, good questions. First of all, unfortunately, we don't have a list necessarily of where the challengers are. They do have to come in and show their credential to you when they arrive.
Okay.
And there are 2 designated places that we would have for the challengers. One is behind the electronic poll book station. The other is at the tabulator station, basically where the election worker is there, taking the tabs off the ballots and collecting the applications to vote. So in August, we had this issue of the state's requirement was 6 feet of distance between the challenger and any election worker. And they have to be wearing a mask as well. So in August, with that 6 feet of distance, it's difficult, very difficult for the challenger to see the poll book, especially the list of voters, which is on that far right-hand side. And so we ended up talking with both the Republican and Democratic parties and basically kind of offering them the option of saying, you can stand by that table where the tabulator station is. And it's just more easily readable if an election worker,
places the application to vote down on the table for just a few seconds so that can see it. They can't touch it, but they can see it. And that seemed to work really well. We had really positive response from the GOP was the main, and they still continue to be the main entity that provides challengers. They seem to like that a lot. So that being said, I would suggest that they do have the right to be behind the e-poll book station. So they may want to be. The other challenge that we just came down yesterday from the Court of Claims, they ruled, or basically was a settlement with the Secretary of State's office, that the challengers can be closer than 6 feet distance. So that the Secretary of State was sued over that guidance and basically lost yesterday afternoon in the Court of Claims. We did update your clerks on that issue. But again, I'm really hopeful that that's not going to be a huge problem, just because the majority of the challengers have really appreciated the option to go at that application to vote table. So that's definitely something.
Excuse me. So they can be right behind that person who's giving those out to see them, and then that person After they look at it, they set it down so the poll watcher can look at it, and then they pass it on to the computer person.
Well, it's not the computer person. So it would be the station at the end where, you know, the voter checks into the e-poll book, gets issued a ballot in a secrecy sleeve. They take all that stuff and their application to vote. They go vote. And at the end, before they get to the tabulator, they have to hand that application to vote back off to the election worker there.
Got it.
So-
Okay, so that's where they're looking at that.
Yeah, and I was in a few precincts in August where challengers were at, and it seemed to be a pretty good setup, either alongside that table, kind of behind, just as long as it's kind of clearly delineated that the challenger is not a election worker. That's the biggest thing. We don't want a voter confusing the challenger for one of you guys, you know, one of your people.
Sure. Make them stand all day and, you know.
And that,
Don't know.
you know, if there's not adequate space to put chairs, there's nothing in the statute that says we have to. The statute says we have to provide reasonable accommodation. So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And one other note on that. So for our absentee counting board situations, we have an interesting dilemma because the absentee counting boards are, of course, sequestered for election day. So if someone joins you first thing in the morning, they're stuck with you all day, or vice versa. So so that is something to be aware of, that they are sequestered until the polls are closed at 8 p.m. Additionally, absentee counting boards can have one challenger per party or interest group. The in-person precincts can have 2 challengers per party or interest group. So that is something that the parties are definitely going to have folks there. They very well may be planning on hanging out all day.
And there are 2 interest groups that have requested to have challengers in the county. That is the NAACP and the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights. So your clerks have all been provided that information as well, but there's 2 potential interest groups. And to be honest with you, I don't expect that there will be many. I'm sure there will be some throughout the county, but certainly not as many as we have Republican challengers and even Democratic challengers. There have been quite a few.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one other thing, if you have a copy of the training manual, you can also see a listing of the differences between poll challengers and poll watchers on page 57 in Appendix F. So it kind of walks you through what they can and can't do. So for example, challengers have to have some sort of credential showing that they are official. Poll watchers don't have this. Challengers have to be registered to vote in Michigan. They have the right to challenge an individual's eligibility, and they can also challenge actions of the election inspectors. Poll watchers must remain in the public viewing area where the challengers can be behind the processing table. And also they have the right to review the poll book and other election materials, but of course they can't handle any of those materials. Poll watchers and challengers also can't use any sort of video camera, or they can't take photographs in the precinct. So challengers may use a cell phone or a tablet to keep track of their voters. They're often checking off names from a list of their folks and letting the parties know who's come in to vote. And if somebody doesn't come in to vote yet, then they're probably going to be getting a phone call. Other than that, though, the poll challengers can't wear anything that's obviously supporting a party, nor can anyone else in the precinct. And sort of on that point as well, if a voter comes in wearing any sort of election material, that we do have to ask them to remove that item. So whether it's a hat or a t-shirt or a button, we have to ask them to remove anything that has a candidate's name or the candidate's official slogan. So that is something that we are required to not have in the precinct. They can wear whatever they want to wear 100 feet away from the building. They can put up signs, they can wave banners and flags, but they have to do it 100 feet away.
Are you saying that everything is legal except the name or pertaining to a particular candidate, right?
It would be the name or their official campaign slogan. So
But everything else is good.
everything else is good. I mean,
Or a political party,
yeah.
specific to a political party as well.
Okay, now I gotta bring this up. Black Lives Matters. Now, what is that?
That Black Lives Matter,
question.
Don't Tread on Me, those things are not candidate slogans, so they would be permissible.
Okay, very good.
I do have a question myself.
Yeah.
I noticed the precinct that I'm gonna be at, across the street, there's a guy that has a political party's ad in his yard.
Mhm.
Am I supposed to walk over to his house and ask him to take that down?
Is it over 100 feet away, or is it very,
It's
very
across
close?
it's across the street of the parking lot as you drive in.
Yeah.
As long as it's 100 feet from the door to the
From the
building.
door.
Yes.
Yep, it's from the entrance to the building. So
Okay.
we have really very few precincts in locations that I'm aware of that there's a yard closer than that.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know what, I'd have to take a measuring tape to measure it, but
Sure. And that might be something I would refer to your clerk to try to see if they could navigate for you with the voter, like if it's actually within that 100-foot distance. I'm
I
actually
don't know.
not aware of any.
I don't know if it's gonna be there. I don't know if it's gonna be there a day of election, but I noticed that it, I'm in the community center in Zealand. And
Oh, okay.
I noticed it's right across the street.
Right across the street on Cherry there.
Yeah, I believe it's Cherry, whatever that street is, but
Okay.
because that's a residential area.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can
So,
look at that. That's my polling location too.
okay,
I live in
so,
Zealand, so I'll check that out. I know that actually I had talked to Pam about a sign on Cherry Street earlier in the year. I think it was in August. So yeah, we'll check that out. But I would say, you don't have to worry about it
okay.
yourself. I mean, it's be nice if you can, if you see it, to talk with Pam about it that morning. But hopefully Pam can handle that one.
Yeah, and that brings up the next question is that, are we supposed to be walking outside during the whole day and making sure somebody's not posting another sign?
I mean, it would not hurt occasionally. Some of it depends. Obviously, your first priority is managing that precinct inside and the voters inside. But it definitely wouldn't hurt to do, a round every once in a while, every few hours, if you have the time. The other thing is, frequently what happens is voters will come in and let you know what's going on too. So
Yes.
it's always good to check that out,
Okay.
if someone's complaining about something.
Definitely. Our voters tend not to be shy, so that's helpful in these instances.
Thank you.
Yes. So so definitely great questions. Very good discussion. I do want to skip ahead though to some polling place management issues in the interest of
Quick-
time. Oh, sure.
Quick, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm just looking at the rest of this chart.
Mhm.
The right to approach and question voters. This may not happen, but in, small towns, everybody's related to everybody else or knows somebody else or whatever. They're not supposed to approach and question voters. What if they know somebody or whatever? I mean, we should be pretty strict on that whole thing, right? Even if it's a friend or relative or a, hey, I didn't know you voted here and blah, blah, they should keep all that separate, correct?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
that goes for all of our election inspectors too. So for, precinct chairs, folks at the poll book, at the poll book station, obviously, you're going to see your neighbors, you're going to see, friends and relatives coming through. But we have to make sure that we're asking everybody for ID, even if we've known them all our lives.
Sure.
We have to make sure that we're not talking about the election. We're not talking about any candidates on the ballot. So the same rules apply for anyone, challengers, the members of the public, and our workers as well.
And where it says they may remain in the polling place till the election inspectors complete their work, that means they can observe as you're running the all those reports and everybody signing them and all that kind of stuff. Can they
That's right.
Look at those reports then after they're run?
Yep, the same rules apply. So challengers, as long as they're not being disruptive, they can view any of the materials. We can show them the reports, and then but they just can't handle any of those materials.
Okay.
And in some cases, I believe the challengers are actually requested, part of their training from the party is to ask to see the zero report when they get there. Things like that. So it's definitely fine to allow that.
Absolutely.
On a final tape, can they ask for a copy themselves or not?
They can. There's nothing that would prohibit us from releasing that. I know in a few cases that's been the case. Sometimes candidates cannot appoint poll challengers. They occasionally do appoint. They ask for people to be poll watchers in the precinct to see the precinct results. But the tape is not confidential information. Obviously, it would have to be a copy of it. It wouldn't be, the original that you're providing, signing to the clerk and board of canvassers and county clerk. But that is something that we would allow.
Yep. And if you have extra tape available after you print your 3 reports, you can print additional reports as needed. So there's no prohibition on that. Yeah. Okay. Great question. So I do want to get to polling place management. There's been a lot of activity on this. And we do have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions as well. But essentially, this section kind of goes through what is and what is not allowed in the polling place. I'm going to start off with talking about guns in the polling place in particular. There have been multiple challenges to this. This has been in the news quite a bit. Essentially, the Secretary of State's office issued some guidance saying that that any firearms would not be allowed within 100 feet of a polling place. This was challenged, and the Court of Claims has ruled that this particular guidance cannot be enforced. And so what we have is basically status quo. So what the rule was before was that firearms are only allowed in what's considered a gun-free zone, which is typically churches and schools, which contain a lot of our polling places. They're predominantly in churches. Gun-free zones are firearms are concealed fire. Yeah, sorry, I'm tripping over myself. Firearms are prohibited from being in churches, but if someone has a concealed pistol license, they can open carry a firearm in a gun-free zone. So in many of our polling locations that are in churches, this would apply. So if someone has a CPL, they can open carry in the precinct on election day. There's nothing specific in election law talking about firearms. What we do have, though, is we are not, obviously voter intimidation of any kind is not allowed. And if someone is threatening in any capacity in a precinct, we have a great relationship with our sheriff's office. They're very, very well informed with what's been happening on this particular issue. And we do encourage you all as the precinct chairs to call 911 if you feel that anyone is being threatening or causing any kind of disturbance. So it may be that someone is open carrying a weapon within 100 feet of a polling place. That if if you feel the need to call the sheriff's office, they will respond, and they can wait there. And
De-escalate the situation, essentially.
yes, yep,
Yeah, and this has
exactly.
been we've never had an issue with this in Ottawa County. This is not something that's frequent. It's not something that's been, a disturbing problem for our voters. So, we've been in regular communication, not just with the sheriff's office, but with Zeeland, Holland, and Grand Haven police departments as well. Every one of our law enforcement agencies has the list of polling locations. The plan for them is to patrol around the areas of polling locations all day long. Patrol officers will be in the vicinity of the polling locations. They're not going to go into the building unless they're asked. So it's not like they're going to be walking through buildings. But please do, if there is an incident or anything, that makes you or a voter feel unsafe or uncomfortable in terms of intimidation kind of tactics, you can absolutely utilize 911, and they're prepared for that. I will say though, I mean, we have a great community. I'm not, some of this stuff is frustrating because it gets in the media, and, the back and forth and the litigation kind of puts it to a higher level maybe than it needs to be. I mean, we have a great community. People care for one another here. I know this is a heated time in our country, but I think most of our voters, vast majority of them, are just normal common sense people that are trying to get in and out of the polling location and vote. And I really don't anticipate any big issues, but.
Definitely. So I think on firearms, that's really our main issue. There are a couple of other things on page 34 of the manual that are tend to be slightly less controversial, although ballot selfies can really rile people up. But we have here a list of campaign materials, of course. Campaign materials of any kind that show a candidate's name or slogan cannot be in the polling place, but they can be 100 feet away. Electronic devices cannot be displayed in the polling place. If someone is discreetly checking their phone because that's where their list of who they're going to vote for is located, I think that is okay as long as voters are being discreet and we're using some discretion to make sure that nobody is being unduly influenced in the polling place. Poll challengers, of course, though, can have a phone or tablet out because they're using that to check off names of voters in the precinct. And then ballot selfies. Taking a picture of yourself with a ballot or literally any other person in the precinct is prohibited. Taking a picture of just your voted ballot, though, is allowed. This, again, is sort of a complicated ruling. I don't know that voters truly understand the ins and outs of this particular rule. And I think it's very important that we use our discretion as best as we can when policing this. We want to make sure that our voters are not exposing themselves or anyone else's voted ballot in the precinct. And we want to make sure to protect everyone's privacy in the precinct as well. But the court cases have ruled that voters do have the right to take a picture of their own ballot, provided that it doesn't show them or anyone else in the precinct. So that's another bit of discretion, and fortunately something that's not an issue in an absentee counting board setting, but something that we are likely to see on election day. I think that the main thing with this, and really with any of these rules, is we want to make sure that people are able to come and go freely from the precinct as easily as possible. So I think the last thing I want to touch on is on page 35, emergency procedures. I did shared a copy of the training manual in the chat. If you don't have a paper copy or you can't have any trouble downloading the version in the chat, feel free to send us an email and I can email a copy of the training manual directly to you. The emergency procedures section just kind of goes over a few important details. One thing to note is for building issues, it's really important to make sure that you know who to contact at the polling location. Who has a key to get you into the building? If you don't have a key, where is it? Who do you contact for other building issues? If the power goes out, if there's a flood, if there's a maintenance issue, who do you get a hold of that actually is in charge of that building? Your clerks will have that information. They all have agreements with the polling locations, assuming that it's not directly in the city or township hall, which some of our precincts are. So make sure to get that contact information as quickly as you can. And also, if there's a power outage in the building, your voting equipment has battery backup. Both your scan and your touch writer have battery backup, and that will last for a couple of hours. If for some reason the devices are not usable, then your ballot box actually has an auxiliary bin. So the large black ballot box has an auxiliary bin that's sealed with a blue plastic seal. You can cut that seal and then use the auxiliary bin for voting. And then once the tabulator is back up and running, any ballots that are in that auxiliary bin can then be run through the working tabulator. So that's something that can happen as an absolute fail-safe, but you do have 2 hours of battery backup, kicks on right away. One thing I will note though, on the touch writer, because the printer requires so much power, it does not actually have battery backup. So the touch writer can actually just be powered off if the power goes out, basically to conserve battery life. And then the battery in the touch writer can actually be used. We would send out a troubleshooter to actually do this. But if you need to, as an absolute backup, we could use the battery in the touch writer to extend the life of the tabulator if need be. We haven't actually had to do that, just kind of one of those contingency plans. And we do have troubleshooters out in the field who can help with these sorts of equipment issues as well. For any medical emergency, for any sort of emergency at all, feel free to call 911. There's also the non-emergency line for any medical issues is listed here as well. That's in the training manual, 1-800-249-0911. And then finally, evacuation procedures. So it is very important that you know who's working in your precinct and that we keep everybody safe. If for whatever reason we need to evacuate a precinct, as far as the election is concerned, the only thing that is required in the law that we maintain is the poll book. So whoever's at the poll book station would grab the laptop, make sure the flash drive's still installed, and hightail it out of there. Make sure that you keep everybody safe and have a predetermined meeting location as well. So talk with your team when you get to the polling place. Say, there's this tree over there that's a good distance away. If there's fire alarm goes off or need to evacuate for whatever reason, know that there's a spot that you can account for everybody in the precinct, and make sure that the most important thing that everybody stays safe. The ballots, we often get the question what to do about the ballots. If the polling place has to be evacuated, the only thing we have to take with us is the poll book. The ballots obviously are in a large container. It's in a heavy locked box. They'll be, if we have to recreate the election anyway, we use the poll book for that. So we want to make sure that people don't endanger themselves to protect the ballots. So something to keep in mind. There is also a brief safety plan in the very back pages of the manual. Let's see. Oops. And this is on pages 73 and 74. Basically, this is a generic listing of what to do in these instances. So a medical emergency, dial 911, fire emergency, make sure to begin your evacuation procedures. In a violent or active shooter situation, make sure to exit the building as quickly as possible. There's a list of, let's see if I can rotate my screen so we can actually read this. There we go. That should be a little less headache inducing. So exit the building if you can safely. If exiting is impossible, hide out of view, and then barricade any doors to any hiding places if need be. These are just standard procedures from our emergency management department. And we also have other issues as well. So if there's any sort of threat that's called in, call 911 immediately. Hopefully we don't have a tornado on election day. Actually, I checked the weather and it's supposed to actually be nice, which will be a nice change. So there's issues there. And then of course, any utility issues, it's very important to have contact information for the folks who are in charge of that. Your local clerks, of course, will help out with those issues in particular. Okay, so we ran just a few minutes over, but I do have plenty of extra time. So if you have questions, happy to take any questions that you have right now.
I have one. I was going through all my materials and we've got this street index listing.
Mhm.
What I don't know what that's telling me.
Oh,
And
was
what
that
it's for? It's a street index listing.
that was given to you by the clerk?
Yeah, it was in my packet of stuff. I mean, it
Okay.
doesn't, and it was numbered and everything for,
Mhm.
you know.
Well, I can tell you,
Okay.
sure. So that's actually not going to, you're probably not going to need that on election day. That is used to determine if someone's address falls within the jurisdiction. But that would only be for anybody who's not registered. If they're not registered, they're going back to the clerk's office. So
So
that it
need to
was,
worry about this.
no, it may come in handy, but it has, I think it has interesting information in it, but I don't think it's all that useful on election day.
Well, and it's got a lot of things that you have to look up what the code is and all of that. So that's a nice chunk of paper I can recycle.
Yes. Yes. Your clerk will have that if you need it.
Okay.
Just a question on the spoiled ballots. I don't see too many spoiled ballots because it's pretty clear that you could mix match your votes and stuff like that. But if something happens that the rejects it and you want to override it, it does not, like the partisan, nonpartisan, it doesn't erase the whole section, does it? It just erases that particular race?
So if you vote in the straight party option, that applies to any of the partisan contests, so everything up until judges, and it does not apply to the judges or proposals. If you vote individually in any one of those contests, that contest vote overrides the straight party vote in that contest only. So it works pretty seamlessly for voters. If you select a party, but you like somebody else in a contest, that's totally fine. And we do see voters have lots of questions about this, and we may get spoiled ballots because of this issue for sure. But it's something that we can explain to voters. Just when we do it, we want to try to avoid giving specific candidate or party examples if we can. Use a demonstration ballot if we have it available.
But if when you override it,
Mhm.
the portion that is deleted is strictly the race that you're looking at, not the whole section.
Yeah, and it's not exactly deleted. It's more that your vote is overriding the straight party vote, so you can change your vote. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Definitely. And
I
sorry,
I have
yeah.
two questions.
Mhm.
First question is at the end of the night, at 8 o'clock, and if there's a line out there, which I'm fully expecting, there's going to be people coming all night long, all day long. Do we at 8 o'clock have somebody stand outside saying this is the last person, you can't vote after? Anybody else cannot get in line after 8 o'clock?
Yes, that's a great question. So the way that I hear most of our jurisdictions handling this is that they actually hand out applications to vote to voters who are in line at 8 o'clock. If you have the staff available and can station somebody, that's very helpful. But if not, you can also hand applications out to voters, and then like once the end of the line has come in, that this is the point at which we have to cut it off.
That's a good point. I didn't realize, I didn't think about that. That's good.
But yeah.
Second question is, you've been referring to this manual, and the manual I have here is the inspection manual. Is revised February 14, 2020. Is that the latest, or are you looking at a different manual?
I did update it slightly in July. The information is largely the same though. So if you have a
Okay.
February edition, that's
You
okay.
your pages were not the same, and I kept losing what was going on.
Oh,
And so, do I get a revised menu from my clerk, or do I get it from you?
well, you can do either. You can either email your clerk or send me an email directly, and I can email that to you. I've also dropped the link in the chat window as well, and you can download that
Okay.
to your computer. Yeah. So either way
Okay.
is totally fine. But the February edition's not that out of date. It's just a couple of changes with the touch writer. Issuing ballots on the touch writer has gotten a little bit easier actually. So that still
Yeah, I'm
works.
gonna go see my clerk. I'm gonna see my clerk here pretty quick anyway. She likes to swear us in beforehand, so that's one thing she don't have to do before
That's
the day of the election.
that's great. Anything we can take care of early is great.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one other question I see in the chat is asking if this session is recorded, and it is being recorded, and I'll make sure to share this out with our local clerks. So if you want to go over this again, you can check with your local clerk. They should have a copy of this training available. Let's see. There's also another question.
Yeah, so, and I'm pretty sure it was covered, but I just want to make sure I have it 100% right.
Mhm.
If someone comes to the precinct with their ballot and says, I have this absentee ballot, but now I want to vote in person, I have to send them back to the clerk's office, or can I take that, note it in the poll book, and issue a new ballot?
Yes, definitely. So if they have their ballot with them, you can accept it as surrendered and then issue them a regular precinct ballot. So you do not have to send them away. You can take care of that transaction right then and there. But the voter does have to surrender their ballot. That ballot is not voted, and then they can be issued a regular ballot in the precinct. But great question. And then also, just to reiterate too, if the voter doesn't have their ballot, but they have a status flag in the poll book that says that their ballot, that they've been issued an absentee ballot, they do have to sign an affidavit that says their ballot's either been lost or destroyed before they can be issued a regular ballot.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And I think there's one other question in the chat. Let's see here. Chat window's giving me trouble here. So the question is regarding absentee counting boards. It is okay for workers. So asking if it's okay for workers to be kind of in separate physical spaces. That is okay, provided that we still maintain our Democrat and Republican split. So we want to make sure that we still have a good mix of election workers. We do want to be distanced, so there's going to be definite issues there where we want to make sure that we have enough space, especially in our absentee counting boards. We're working pretty much hand in hand. But that really is up to, this particular question is really up to local clerks procedures, whatever they're most comfortable with. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, if not, I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Very, very much appreciate everything that you all do. And I'll also, let's see. I'm going to put my email address. So I just, oops, let's see. Trying to send it to everybody. The challenges of Zoom, trying to send messages. Okay, so that's my email address, sdh@miottawa.org. You can feel free to email me at any time. You can also give me a call. I'll give you my phone number here as well. It is 616-994-4535. You can call our office anytime. We will be here on election day. We'll also have a list of troubleshooters for the election equipment. We'll be sending out to your local clerks in the next day or so, so that your local clerks will have that for you as well. So if there's any questions, feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you again. Very much appreciate your questions and your willingness to serve your community. So really, really appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.